budget for Bulletproof Bharat, and of course the all-important economic survey has been tabled in Parliament by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman just a few minutes ago. We are going through that 739-page long document, but some of the highlights that have emerged are that India's growth, the GDP growth rate for FY26, this current financial year, is expected to come in at 7.4%. But next year, FY27, we are looking at a range between 6.8% and 7.2%. Now, the economic survey also points out the fact that India continues to be faced, like the rest of the economy, with a global environment that, to quote the economic survey, is fragile. Now, a lot to discuss, a lot to go over, but some of the highlights that are emerging at the stage are that unemployment rate in India has ticked downwards. Gross capital formation, both the private as well as the government's initiatives, have ticked up slightly. Overall, inflation is on a downward trajectory. No breaking news there. But the fact that India The fact that India was able to clock a 7.8% growth rate in Q1 of this financial year and 8.2% growth rate in Q2 of this financial year, and the GST 2.0 reforms that came into effect only in the third quarter, likely to boost the GDP growth rate even higher than Q1 and Q2. What could potentially go wrong in Q4 to have the aggregate growth rate coming in at 7.4%? Well, we don't have all the answers here, and remember, the 739-page long document is going to be at least a few days before we actually end up reading every word of it. But let's just try and make sense of whatever we know at the moment. And I have Mithali Nikore joining me, economist and somebody who follows the economy closely and is a regular with us on the show. Mithali, thank you so much for your time. We also have Mr. Dilip Chenoy, and we have a battery of special guests joining us this morning. I will introduce them as I ask them questions. But first up, Mithali, to you. 7.4% growth rate expected in this financial year, FY26. Does it seem a little too protected as a number, or do you think it's ambitious enough?
No, I think, Karthik, when we look at the analysis in the economic survey, and of course, even I haven't gone through the 739 pages, and I'm hoping my AI agent will do some of that for me. But, you know, if we think about the overall themes that are coming out in the economic survey, one theme which runs through every chapter, every section, is the global uncertainty. There is actually a whole section right at the beginning of the economic survey that is dedicated to an analysis of the global economy, how the global bond yields are moving, how the global inflation rates are moving, how the global growth expectations are moving. And within that context, then, we find the placement of India, and we find that India is currently the fastest growing emerging economy in the world. In fact, it is the fastest growing economy in the world in 2026 and projected to also do so in 2027. And this is not just driven by the global factors. Actually, this is driven by domestic demand. And I think even in the statements coming from the finance minister, from the chief economic advisor, the fact that India's domestic consumption demand remains robust, and that is sort of one of the biggest drivers of this growth rate, is the main story that's coming out. And also the fact that we've controlled our inflation rates, that really driving that domestic demand as well.
Absolutely, Mithali. All right, we also have Mr. Dilip Chenoy, former Secretary General of FICCI, joining us. Mr. Chenoy, I want to understand from you primarily, I think this entire narrative which we saw building during, let's say, the COVID years and the 5 financial years thereafter, the fact that the heavy lifting of growth is actually being done by the government, and next in turn was the consumption story. But looking at the data right now, it seems that even the private sector's fixed capital formation is ticking up fairly well. I will give you the numbers, sir. We are looking at private final consumption expenditure now having grown in the first half of this financial year as much as 7.5% versus the government final consumption expenditure, which has gone up just about 2.5% or so in the first half of this financial year. I understand there is a base effect, sir, but I want to understand from you that at 7.5%, does it seem that the animal spirits of corporate India are finally getting unlocked, and this momentum could potentially continue going ahead? If you could unmute yourself, please, Mr. Chenoy.
Yeah, it was just thank you, Karthik. And as mentioned by Mithali, we've not been able to read the 739-page document. So, I'll give you an analysis based on the question that you've asked. I think, my gut feel, and I said this in your channel earlier also,
Yeah.
that the data on private sector, whether it is investment or consumption, was maybe coming into the lag, and therefore it was not being shown as such in the data that we come. And it's very good that this economic survey actually captures that data and shows us the growth, and there's a growth greater than, earlier you rightly said it may be a base effect. But, if you see over the past few years or last 1.5 years, ever since the PLI scheme was announced, right? Each of the 14 sectors of the PLI scheme had significant investment commitments. And even if you just took those investment commitments and total them up, you would see that, there is a discrepancy between what is being reported and what is happening in the ground. But I think now the data is capturing, if I would say, the green shoots of the economy and the investment by the private sector. And over the past 1.5 years, the government has taken another lot of initiatives, and of course, the most recent one being the signing of the EU-India FTA, which is actually providing a greater opportunity for industry to even look beyond India.
Right.
And one of the important factors here is that not only domestic consumption, but we also need to look at exports.
All right. So, of course, even the export story is shoring up fairly well. And I'm glad that you brought it up, Mr. Chinoy. I want to take this question now to Dr. Aruna Sharma, IAS and author practitioner of development economist, as well as the former Secretary of Steel. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time. And I really want to talk about the export story with you, because the numbers that we are seeing on the screen seem fairly encouraging, if I can say it, given the fact that exports are now contributing as much as 21.5% to India's growth, and that 21.5% estimated, the final advanced estimate which is coming in, suggesting that 21.5% of India's GDP is now made of exports. Now, this comes in a year that we have actually been hit with tariffs. Despite that, we've seen India's overall exports minus the US have continued to grow as much as about 7.5%. But exports now making up more than 20% of the Indian economy is definitely great news, isn't it?
Yes, it's a positive news if you look at it from that point of view. But what is most important is that our ambition is to reach 50%, right? Especially from the MSMEs, which is not growing up. And our exports are under constant threat. We are looking at FTAs, and we are also looking very carefully at the kind of exports we are doing it. So if you look at the exports, the gems and jewelry and the pharmacy were the leading ones. They continue to be leading one, though disrupted. Steel has taken up, and they are maintaining their levels of exports where it should go. But what is worrisome here is, in the new markets, we are yet to establish ourselves. And I strongly feel that MSME exports is something we have to look for. And steel, if I tell you, the MSMEs will be the lead factors, because they will be able to look at the carbon emission requirements, which the European Union has put forward, and which is not a part of the FTA. So our small manufacturers who are through electric arc furnace will be able to meet the targets and go for the exports. So we are quite confident on that. But yet, I will say a miles to go ahead. Because if we are targeting for MSMEs to contribute 40 to 50%, then we are only 27% there.